one of the questions I had, Brian, is in terms of who uses VWAP, or even anchored VWAP for that
Mhm.
matter. We know that, you know, some retail traders use VWAP, you and many others use anchored VWAP as well. Are some of the bigger institutions focused on VWAP, or is that something that they just disregard?
No, that's actually some things that I wrote about in my book. In fact, the VWAP itself was created as an institutional tool in 1988 to help institutions realize whether they're getting a fair price for their orders or not. So the VWAP is for one day. The anchored VWAP simply means you start the beginning of the VWAP measurement from any place other than the beginning of the day. You could start it at 10 a.m., and that would be anchored to 10 a.m., or you could start it to the beginning of the year, or December 18th of 2021, if that was the COVID low. It wasn't, but what I'm trying to say is important events. So when we look at that and say where the VWAP itself came from as an institutional benchmark, there's an example in my book where I spoke about Warren Buffett went and sold a bunch of his airline. He sold out of his airline stocks, and they announced that he started selling this day. It was a 2-day liquidation because he has to act quick. He can't let people know he's selling because everyone else will front run him. So he had to get out of it quick. And it was a VWAP guaranteed order by his broker, because when I looked at the price they reported they sold these 13 million shares at, it was the exact volume weighted average price for those 2 days. So what happens is the institutions, in order to try to get business from someone like Warren, will say, hey, listen, call us up. We'll guarantee you volume weighted average price. And if we do worse, that's on us. If we do better and we're able to, if the VWAP for the 2 days was $23.42, if we sell it at 23, well, we eat the 42 cents on the 14 million shares. We'll take that, but because we want your business, Mr. Buffett. Or if they say we sold it at $23.60, well, that 18 cents difference, good job on them. They beat the market on an impossible order, right? To liquidate that much. So they keep that. So it's just a standard way of saying, are my brokers, are they ripping me off? Or are they doing the right thing for me and getting me a good price? So it keeps the broker and the customer really aligned in the same way that we're trying to do at least this good for you. At least they call it the price a naive trader could expect to get, is what VWAP is really kind of called. So if they're doing that, they're doing a good job for their customer.
That's pretty fascinating. And I remember reading this example in your book and thinking to myself, well, if VWAP is good enough for Warren Buffett, I'm sure that it's good enough for retail traders out there. Granted, they learn about it and know how to use it effectively.
Right.
And so for anchored VWAP, what are some popular anchor points, or at least anchors that you would recommend for traders who want to learn and start using anchored VWAP?
I mean, you can go on for a while here, and that's where it could get a little confusing. Is that there's a lot of different strategies you can implement around the volume weighted average price and the anchored VWAP. So for me, I like for where there's a big catalyst in the market, a catalyst that changes price rapidly, and it's usually accompanied by large volume. So events like the Federal Reserve announcement, an earnings report, CPI, things like that. When the market gets a real shakeup, then we want to measure the average price since that point. So those are great. As I mentioned earlier in my swing trades, what I want to see is the stock correct for 3 to 4 or 5 days, turn sideways for a day, and I want to see the average price from that prior peak start to come down. And as the price kind of bats up against it, it breaks up through that level. The point where it breaks up through the level from the high, so let's just call it 6 days ago, it tells me at that point with 100% certainty that the buyers have regained control from the average price during that stock where it made that high and began a pullback. The average short seller who was trying to, short during that pullback is on average losing money. Doesn't mean they all are, but we're interested in the crowd psychology, crowd behavior, and the net effect of them on the stock price, because that's what stock prices are. So we want to look at that and say, here's where the buyers are in control. Now we have to consider that that's not an automatic place to buy the stock. How did it get there? Did it just rally, 8% in 2 hours to get through that level? And now it's a little bit extended, and maybe this is a FOMO purchase. So let it settle down a little bit. So from that pullback high, and maybe from the prior, swing low, where it might have gone from, let's just say 20 to 30, and then it pulls back from 30 to 34, and we have that anchor from the to 24. We have that anchor from 30 that comes bearing down on it, hits it at 25, then finally breaks through. And underneath, you'll see the volume weighted average price from that 20 low come in and cradle it. It might hit 19 and bounce. It might hit 20 and bounce. Then it comes up and the range compresses between those two off of the swing low and swing high. And we start to see that compression in energy, saying the buyers are defending it because it's bouncing from the VWAP from below. And the sellers are becoming less aggressive because that's flattening out. Now the bigger trend is in an uptrend. So now I want to watch for the shorter term time frame that the buyers gain control. And again, how did it get there? Where does my stop go? How can I participate? And that just comes down to shorter term time frame analysis and keeping emotions out of it as best you can.